She stayed calm, handed over her ID like they asked, no attitude, no argument. They laughed, like they were doing her a favor by checking credentials. But then the scanner lit up. The screen flashed an emblem they didn't recognize until it clicked. Federal clearance. Suddenly, the smirks disappeared. The silence hit hard, because the woman they thought they could mess with, she outranked every single one of them. That IT was just past 6 p.m. on a quiet Thursday when she pulled into the parking lot. A warm dusk settled over the neighborhood association building, a low-slung structure that looked more like a glorified clubhouse than a seat of power. White siding, an American flag out front, and a large banner by the doors that read, "Community Board Meeting tonight. Residents only." She wasn't just a resident. She wasn't just on time. She was exactly where she needed to be. Her car was unremarkable, a charcoal sedan with government plates, easy to overlook unless you were looking closely. She stepped out, straightened the front of her navy blue blazer, and checked her badge wallet once before sliding it back into the side of her tote. She wasn't wearing anything flashy, slacks, flats, and a crisp collared shirt. But something about her presence caught attention immediately. Maybe it was how calm she looked, how confident she moved. Or maybe, for people like Karen and her crew, it was just the fact that she was a black woman walking toward their building without hesitating. And for some folks, that was enough to cause suspicion. She had barely reached the front steps when the first interruption came. A man in a poorly fitted security polo stepped forward from his folding chair near the door. He had a clipboard in one hand and a radio in the other. His name tag read Chad, which felt almost too on the nose. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, holding up his palm. "Can I ask what business you have here?" She gave a slight smile. "I'm here for the 6:30 meeting. I'm a property owner in the district." He glanced down at the clipboard, scanning names, then looked her up and down. His eyes hesitated, not just evaluating but assuming. "I don't see you on the guest list," he said flatly. "Do you live in the Woodmere HOA?" "I don't need to be on a guest list," she replied, keeping her voice calm. "I'm here in an official capacity." That phrase, official capacity, clearly hit a nerve. Chad squinted. "Official how?" Another voice chimed in from just inside the doors. A woman, maybe mid-50s with frosted hair and pearls, stepped forward. She had the look of someone who treated passive aggression like a professional sport. "If you're a guest, I'm afraid this is a resident-only meeting. You might be looking for one of the town offices down the road." The woman kept her gaze steady. "No, I'm exactly where I need to be." Karen, because of course it was Karen, crossed her arms and gave a tight laugh. "Then I suppose we'll need to see some ID. Anyone can say they're official these days." Without breaking stride, the woman reached in her tote and pulled out a slim leather badge holder. She opened it slowly, no flourish, no dramatic snap, and handed it to the security guard first. Chad took it, glancing down lazily. He blinked once, then again. Something shifted in his expression, but he said nothing. Karen, now impatient, leaned in behind him. "Oh, please, let me see this supposed ID," she huffed, reaching over his shoulder. She snatched the badge wallet from Chad and glanced at the laminated ID card. Then she laughed, not loudly, just enough for the others nearby to hear. The kind of laugh you only use when you think someone's pretending to be more important than they are. "Well, that's cute," she said, waving the ID in the air like a novelty license plate. "You even laminated it. Very realistic." The woman said nothing. Karen, emboldened, turned toward the small check-in desk where an older laptop rested. "Mind if we scan this little badge?" she asked mockingly. "I'd hate for us to fall for a scam." Chad hesitated, but the damage was done. Karen fed the badge through the external reader. And that's when everything changed. The screen froze for half a second. A loading bar, a click, and then seal loading. Verified. Suddenly, the room lit up. A full-screen emblem filled the monitor, bold, gold, unmistakable. U.S. Department of Justice. Office of Federal Inspections. Level 2 clearance. Active. The air went dead silent. Chad took a step back. Karen's mouth hung, slightly open, her hands still hovering near the badge. "What is this?" she asked quietly, eyes wide. The woman finally stepped forward, retrieved her ID from the table, and tucked it calmly back into her tote. She looked Karen in the eye. You wanted identification, she said. There it is. The board president, who had been lurking in the hallway, emerged nervously. He glanced at the monitor, then at the woman. Ma'am, are you here for the review meeting? She nodded once. I've been assigned to observe tonight's agenda, she said, and to determine whether certain practices at this HOA are in compliance with federal statutes. Karen's hands dropped to her sides. Nobody laughed anymore. Even the tone of the guards shifted. Chad scrambled to offer her a seat. Karen backed away toward the refreshments table. The woman walked into the meeting hall without further resistance, not demanding obedience, but commanding presence. The very same people who had chuckled at her ID now couldn't make eye contact. Outside the hall, a few residents arriving late saw the shift in body language and whispers. Something had changed. Something had arrived. And that something or someone had a badge that wasn't just laminated. It was legally binding. And now, they were all on her watch list. The room didn't know what to do with itself after the emblem appeared. The federal seal had flashed so boldly across the screen that for a split second, no one moved. Not even Karen, whose smug expression now looked like it had been slapped off by reality itself. The board meeting hadn't even started, yet already everyone had stopped pretending. It was no longer just a woman asking to enter. It was now a federal presence inside the room, and not one of them had been prepared for it. Karen tried to regain her footing first. I mean, maybe that's just some state ID badge, she muttered, trying to brush it off to anyone who would listen. People fake those all the time. Could be from some contractor group. You know how easy it is to make one look official. The man behind the front desk, who had scanned the ID and seen the system react in real time, slowly turned the screen toward her and zoomed in. Active clearance. DOJ oversight flag level 2. It wasn't state. It wasn't a contractor. It wasn't fake. The woman in the navy blue blazer stood quietly, arms folded now, as she waited for the rest of the room to catch up. Within seconds, another figure stepped in from the far hallway, a tall, slightly flushed man in a gray windbreaker. He moved with that stiff-jointed energy that said someone just called me in a panic. It was the HOA's regional supervisor, a man named Allen, who was not known for showing up to routine board meetings, let alone rushing. The moment he spotted her, his entire posture shifted. Agent McDaniel, he said, his voice rising slightly in surprise. I didn't realize you were arriving tonight. Every head turned. Good evening, she replied, cool and even. I prefer to attend community hearings unannounced. She didn't say it with malice. She didn't need to. Everyone knew exactly why she came in quietly, to see how they'd act when they thought no one important was watching. Allen nodded solemnly and turned toward the rest of the board. Everyone, I'd like to introduce Senior Compliance Auditor Janelle McDaniel. She's here under authority from the DOJ's Office of Federal Oversight. Chad, the security guard, stood frozen, arms stiff at his sides. Karen took half a step backward. You mean she's not just a guest? Janelle raised a brow. Did I say I was? The shift in authority was no longer theoretical. It was tangible. People who had laughed now looked away. Those who had whispered now fell silent. A couple of board members tried to subtly distance themselves from Karen. One leaned over to the president and whispered, "Why didn't we know someone like that was attending?" The president didn't answer. He just swallowed hard. Karen, grasping for control, tried one more push. Well, then, maybe next time, people should wear something identifiable. How are we supposed to know she was important? That earned a few side eyes, even from her own allies. Janelle tilted her head and gave the tiniest smile. You don't need to recognize importance, she said softly. You just need to recognize respect. Allen cleared his throat. Ms. McDaniel, we're, of course, grateful for your time. If you need anything reviewed ahead of the agenda, we can pause the start of the meeting. Janelle shook her head. No need. I've already seen what I came for. And that sentence, that one statement, was enough to drain the blood from a few faces. Already seen? Seen what? Janelle took her seat near the back corner of the room. Not in the center, not demanding a microphone. Just there, observing. But now everyone was watching her. The atmosphere of the room had changed completely. No more eye rolls. No more sarcasm. Karen tried to sit upright, but her knees didn't cooperate. She lowered herself slowly into a chair 2 rows ahead, glancing over her shoulder more than once. The HOA president cleared his throat and attempted to start the meeting. Let's begin the regular review of Agenda Item 1, Community Garden Violations. But nobody was listening. Every sentence now carried the weight of being heard by someone who could audit it. Later in the meeting, when Karen raised her hand to complain about unauthorized fence colors and loud music from the park near the west cul-de-sac, her words didn't land the same way. Board members did not. They just scribbled notes, eyes flicking nervously toward Janelle. When someone tried to propose a motion to increase homeowner fines, Janelle quietly asked to see the section of the bylaws being referenced. She read it silently, then nodded once. No legal conflict here, she said, but I'd be interested in seeing how these fines have been distributed in the past 2 quarters. That one comment silenced the entire panel for 15 seconds. Karen didn't speak again. Outside, after the meeting adjourned, a few members tried to make small talk. I hope the earlier mix-up didn't seem too rude, one said nervously. Karen just likes to be cautious. Janelle nodded, her tone unchanged. That's fine. I prefer people show me who they are before they know who I am. The front desk staff looked like they wanted to melt into the laminate. Chad, red-faced, offered a bottled water. Sorry about the entrance thing, he mumbled. Just doing my job, She took the bottle. Now you are. Back in her car, as she shut the door and started the engine, the same quiet strength returned. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't demanded. She hadn't needed to, because tonight, just by showing up, she had turned their entire hierarchy upside down. The meeting might have ended with polite applause and tepid smiles, but the investigation had already begun. Janelle didn't need to announce it. She didn't flash credentials or rattle chains of bureaucracy. That wasn't her style. She knew that real accountability didn't come from spectacle. It came from documentation, from systems, from putting a magnifying glass over things people thought they'd buried. So, while Karen tried to pretend nothing had happened, brushing off the earlier embarrassment as a misunderstanding, Janelle filed her first report before she even left the parking lot. It wasn't titled "Karen was rude to me." It was titled Preliminary Oversight Review, HOA Misconduct Patterns, Woodmere Board. And with that one entry, an entire board's future became subject to scrutiny. By the following week, Janelle had already reviewed 6 months' worth of meeting logs, public complaints, and even internal newsletters. Not only was the board not following protocol, they were selectively enforcing HOA rules, and the patterns weren't just incidental. Her attention was first drawn to the fine discrepancies. A black family down the street had been cited 3 times for leaving a recycling bin visible from the road. Meanwhile, a white homeowner 2 lots over had lawn furniture on the curb for 3 weeks. No citation, no warning. A Ladings couple had received notices for painting their mailbox a color, not in harmony with community tones. But 4 board members had Christmas lights and garden gnomes year-round. One letter in particular stuck out. It was from a 67-year-old retired veteran, African-American, who had written to complain about being fined $500 for trimming a tree too aggressively. He had explained that he was simply clearing branches near his fence line to protect his grandkids. The HOA responded not with empathy, but with an increased fine for unauthorized tree alteration. He ended his letter with 5 words that stayed with her. I don't feel welcome here. Janelle quietly contacted him through the county's complaint portal. He picked up the phone, unsure of what to expect. But when she introduced herself and said she was reviewing enforcement patterns in his area, he paused. You're the one they tried to block at the clubhouse, huh? She smiled gently. Word travels fast. Let's just say I've been waiting for this call. It didn't take long to find others. 3 more families came forward. One Asian American homeowner had received 6 notices in 1 year, all for obscure violations that didn't apply to his lot zoning. Another single mother was warned by Karen that noise complaints could result in fines, even though she lived alone with 2 quiet kids. No one else on her street had been warned for anything. The stories weren't random. They formed a pattern, and Janelle knew exactly how to build a case out of that. She drafted her first formal statement of concern and sent it through her DOJ chain of command. Then, she filed a separate community oversight referral, one of the lesser-known powers of her office. It automatically triggered a pre-compliance audit of the board's rule enforcement. She didn't need to storm the gates. She just sent the emails. And soon after, the walls began to shake. The HOA president received the first letter 2 weeks later. It was worded politely, but it might as well have been a lightning bolt. You are hereby notified that a federal oversight reviewer has flagged your organization for possible discriminatory patterns in the application of bylaws, fine assessments, and community code enforcement. It ended with an ominous line. You are advised to retain all emails, meeting minutes, citation records, and homeowner correspondence from the past 36 months. Karen's reaction was instantaneous and predictable. She went on defense, claimed it was retaliation, told neighbors the whole thing was a witch hunt by some outsider with an attitude. But her neighbors were no longer nodding. They had seen the badge. They had seen the emblem. And they were remembering their own complaints that had been ignored. Soon, someone leaked the email. An internal message Karen had sent to the board read, "I don't like the tone of that new family on the West End. Too aggressive. Let's keep an eye on their landscaping activity." Another board member had replied with a thumbs-up emoji and the words, "Agreed. They don't blend." The email was forwarded to Janelle anonymously. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. A week later, a second envelope arrived, this time from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Someone at the county level had flagged the HOA for potential violations under the Fair Housing Act. Now 2 agencies were watching. Karen started missing meetings. The board scrambled to review policies. They tried to hold an emergency session to clarify roles and responsibilities. But the community wasn't having it. At the next open meeting, the woman who once waved her badge at the door didn't even need to speak. Janelle just sat in the back row with a quiet tablet, occasionally typing. Karen didn't make eye contact. The president stammered through updates. One board member resigned mid-meeting, citing family time. Then the cameras were found. A concerned homeowner, tired of the intimidation, had pulled their doorbell footage from 3 months earlier. It showed Karen walking up to their front step and peering into their window at 9 p.m., clipboard in hand. No warning, no knock, just surveillance. Janelle compiled it all. Emails, video clips, citations, testimonies, bylaw contradictions. When she submitted her final oversight summary, the agency didn't wait. The HOA received a notice of noncompliance. If it didn't implement reforms and training, within 90 days, they would be formally dissolved. Karen tried to call a press conference. Nobody came. She tried to post on the community bulletin. Her messages were taken down. And for the first time in years, she wasn't the loudest voice in the room. Because the woman she tried to laugh at had taken everything she said and turned it into the very evidence that would undo her. Justice didn't come screaming. It walked in with a badge. It asked for ID. And when they laughed, it made sure they never laughed like that again. The letter that arrived on Monday was short, less than 4 lines. Dear Ms. McDaniel, effective immediately, I will be resigning from the board of the Woodmere Homeowners Association. I regret any confusion caused by recent events. Sincerely, Karen L. Draper. No apology, no direct mention of the investigation. But the absence of defiance said everything. Karen was out, and the HOA, the very organization she once lorded over like her personal kingdom, was already collapsing under the weight of everything she left behind. By Tuesday morning, the news had spread. The Office of Federal Oversight had formally cited the HOA for multiple violations of enforcement equity, transparency, and fair housing compliance. HUD had opened a parallel inquiry. The board was told it had 60 days to conduct training, replace its leadership, and publicly adopt new policies, or face dissolution. Karen's name was never mentioned in the federal release. But everyone knew. Her name had become shorthand for arrogance, for the assumption that power equals immunity. And now, the very people who had cheered her on wanted nothing to do with her. A woman named Priya Patel, once a quiet neighbor who rarely spoke at meetings, stepped forward to temporarily chair the board. Her first act? She formally read the findings into the record. Word for word. There was no yelling, no blame, just truth placed on the table for all to see. The atmosphere in the next community meeting was unlike any other before. Gone were the whispered jokes. Gone were the folded arms and passive-aggressive glares. Instead, people sat still, eyes forward, pens ready to take notes. They weren't afraid of Janelle, but they had learned something far more important. You never know who you're dealing with. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop pretending anyone was above the law. Karen's absence became a bigger presence than she'd ever had while sitting on the board. Neighbors spoke quietly in driveways. Some of the same people who once nodded as she nitpicked other families now said things like, "I always had a weird feeling about her," or "She was too into the rules for the wrong reasons." But Janelle didn't attend those meetings anymore. She had no interest in gloating. She had done her job, and now her silence spoke louder than Karen's accusations ever had. Still, the ripple effects didn't stop there. Chad, the security guard who had mocked her at the front door, quietly turned in his badge after being formally reprimanded. His replacement? A retired Army vet with community ties and proper training in implicit bias de-escalation. The front desk staff, who had nervously avoided eye contact that night, now went out of their way to say hello to any guest who entered. The HOA newsletter, once a passive-aggressive pamphlet of fines and HOA holiday potlucks, now included a section titled Know Your Rights. Janelle didn't request it. They added it voluntarily. At her day job, word got around too. The agency wasn't interested in drama, but they took quiet notice of what she had done. Her name circulated in oversight circles, not because she made a scene, but because she didn't. Did you hear what McDaniel did in Woodmere? She flipped a whole board without raising her voice. Didn't even flash the badge. Just let the system work. A promotion wasn't offered. Not yet. But a door opened. And Janelle, ever composed, stepped through when the time was right. Some residents, especially those who had once doubted her, now stopped her on the sidewalk. "Thank you for what you did. I didn't know it could be handled like that. You really changed things here." She always gave the same response. "I didn't change anything. I just turned on the lights." The last time she saw Karen was purely accidental. It was at a gas station just outside town. Karen was in line, sunglasses on, buying a single bottle of water. No clipboard, no pearl earrings, just quiet, like a balloon that had finally let go of all its air. She noticed Janelle. Tried not to. Their eyes met briefly. Karen looked down. Janelle gave a nod. Polite, nothing more. That nod probably hurt more than any victory speech ever could. Because Janelle never shouted. She never made it about revenge. She made it about the truth and the quiet kind of justice that doesn't need volume to be permanent. The new board drafted reforms that mirrored her recommendations. The oversight letters were complied with. The neighborhood newsletter stopped publishing fines as social shaming and started listing community events, food drives, after-school tutoring, voter registration weekends. A neighborhood that once feared authority had finally learned to respect it the right way. And Janelle? She never once asked for recognition. But every now and then, when she walked through town, people stood a little straighter. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Because authority isn't about a badge. It's about how you carry the weight of it. Even when no one's watching. It had been 6 weeks since Janelle last walked into the Woodmere complex. Same glass doors, same lobby tile, but everything else had changed. This time, the doors opened before she even reached them. A new receptionist greeted her. A young woman in a soft blue cardigan who stood when she entered, hand gently placed over the register log. "Good afternoon," she said, smiling. "Welcome. How can I help you today?" No suspicion, no scowl, no whispered judgments. Janelle returned the smile. "Just here for observation," she replied. "Community oversight follow-up." The woman nodded, already knowing. "Take your time. We've made some changes since your last visit." She noticed the first change before she even reached the meeting hall. On the wall, near the directory, hung a new sign, engraved in brushed aluminum. Community Code of Respect. We are committed to transparency, fairness, and equal treatment. All residents and guests will be welcomed with dignity, no exceptions. Enacted following oversight review, month/year. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't political. It was a promise, posted exactly where the old violation chart used to hang. In the meeting room, the setup was familiar. Rows of chairs, a folding table up front, agenda sheets in neat stacks. But this time, the faces were different. Karen, of course, was long gone. In her place sat 3 new board members, diverse in age and background. One was a retired teacher. Another, a young black father of 2. The third, a middle-aged woman who had once been fined for repainting her shutters without permission, now serving on the board that had once fined her. And the tone? Completely different. They didn't start the meeting with a long list of homeowner complaints. They started with a reading of their new mission statement. It included the words inclusivity, integrity, and community trust. It was the kind of statement that could have sounded performative anywhere else, but here it felt hard-earned. Janelle didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her presence in the back row was enough. A quiet reminder that someone once laughed at her ID, and now her principles were hanging on the wall. After the meeting, a few residents approached, some with cautious glances, others with open thanks. One woman, older, with silver hair and a gentle voice, reached out and touched Janelle's arm. "I've lived here 22 years," she said, "and I've never felt like I mattered at these meetings. Not until now. Thank you." Janelle smiled, eyes soft. "You've always mattered. You just needed the room to remember it." On her way out, she passed a small child playing on the community sidewalk, a little girl drawing with chalk near the curb. The girl paused and looked up. "Are you the lady who made the mean lady leave?" she asked innocently. Janelle knelt beside her. "I'm the lady who made the rules fair." The child smiled and held up her drawing, a bright emblem, shaped like a badge, surrounded by hearts. Back in her car, Janelle sat for a moment before starting the engine. She didn't need a trophy, or headlines, or even a thank you card. She had something more important, a system that worked, a community that learned, and a quiet assurance that the next time bias walked into a room, someone stronger would already be there. What once was a hostile building was now a place where her emblem was no longer laughed at. It was respected, and not just because of what it stood for, but because of how she had carried it. Calmly, patiently, powerfully. She was never loud. She never screamed. She simply showed them, through action, what justice looked like on the ground. And in doing so, she gave others the courage to speak up, to question, to change. Because legacy isn't about being remembered for your title. It's about being remembered for the way you made people feel when they were invisible. And Janelle had made them feel seen. Sometimes they laugh before they learn. And sometimes all it takes is a scan of the truth to stop them cold. Janelle didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. All she did was hand over her ID and let the truth light up the screen like a sunrise cutting through fog. Because that's what real power does. It doesn't threaten. It reveals. It exposes the cracks beneath fake authority, the bias behind polite smiles, the fear hiding under control. And it does it without ever needing to raise its volume. If you've ever walked into a room and felt eyes judge you before a single word left your mouth, if you've ever had someone dismiss your presence, laugh at your credentials, or second-guess your worth based on your name, your skin, or your silence, stay calm, stay steady, let your truth do the talking. Because when it's real, when it's earned, your identity isn't up for debate. And the louder they laugh, the harder they'll fall when the truth shows up in bold font and official emblems. Janelle didn't need to put anyone in their place. She reminded them what place she already held. If they mock your presence, show them the power of what you represent. Because badges don't need to be loud to be seen.